Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Educator Colin's Snap channel. How you doing? I'm, I'm trolling myself with these intros. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about Master Mode First Impressions. I'm not really super big on making first impressions for the Series 5 cards, but I figured I'll try it and see what the reception's like. But the obviously the big issue I have with kind of reviewing these is they're going to take a while to go down to Series 3 with the series drop release revealed this week. I kind of have a good idea of how long it's going to take most cards to drop down once they're revealed. They're usually around 6 months. So with that in mind, we can still talk about the cards, but that's always going to be in the back of your head. If you're not already completed Series 3, it's going to take you a long time to get these cards. However, Master Mode, this card adds 2 Sentinels to your hand. Pretty cool, pretty interesting effect in that it has some decent disruption for some decks. It's actually really good into Thanos right now because Thanos players tend to draw a lot of cards with the stones. So you can actually neutralize that advantage. However, I don't think that's good enough to recommend paying for. Thanos should get adjusted in some way and hopefully isn't the meta deck going forward. So I really don't think you should be spending 6,000 tokens just to get a card that's seemingly good for a week into the most popular matchup. So overall, my impressions is I wouldn't recommend buying it right now, but most cards for 6,000 tokens I wouldn't recommend buying. The only cards that really fit that bill currently are the big bats. And even then, I'm still deciding which ones you want to prioritize first. I need to see the patch really before I go into that. But I did want to put up the time frame. It should be in Series 3 by September. It should be in Series 4 by June. So, that's something to keep in mind when you are deciding how to approach these cards. Hopefully, Secondary does something about it because I do think it's a weird time frame for most people to have access to this card. However, it is an interesting card. I do think it's good. And I just want to talk about some of the synergies and some of the interesting benefits of playing a card like Master Mold. So, going here, I wanted to showcase some of the cool synergies that you're going to have with Master Mode. I guess the big, most interesting synergy, for most people would be the Ronin synergy, right? Plus 2 power for each card in your opponent's hand. A lot of people tend to like Ronin. Because of some reason, I don't see the appeal personally. I don't, guys. But some people like Ronin. And this does buff Ronin. It will give them 2 cards that's hard to get rid of. The Sentinels. The Sentinels will keep spawning more Sentinels if you play them on the board. So it's really a hard card to get rid of from your hand. So you're essentially stuck with these Sentinels. So the Ronin's going to get that +4 power. So that's pretty nice. Another thing that you could work with is Darkhawk. So the nice thing about giving people extra cards is there's a max heart hand size of 7. If they hit that max hand size, they won't draw. So a lot of times, especially if they skip turn 1, they're going to already be in max hand size. So it becomes very easy to prevent them from drawing extra cards, which Darkhawk loves. So that's definitely another way you can take advantage of the Master Mode synergy. So those are like the 2 main things, but there's also a lot of synergistic cards in there. If you're going to be doing Ronin, Baron Mordo also does the same thing. Your opponent draws a card. Its cost is expensive. Basically a dead card in your hand. I want people to think of Master Mode as making their opponent's hand size go from 7 to 5, right? And I think that's maybe the better way of, in most circumstances, the better way of looking at it. And if you look at it from that perspective, the card becomes kind of good because you're just limiting the options they have access to in a given turn. And if you can make that even worse for them, right, it just gets better. So I do think this will be a card that we'll see play. However, I wouldn't really recommend paying 6,000 tokens for it, right? That's the main issue I have. If these cards were like Series 3, Series 4, even, I think it's easier to make that investment, but for 6,000 tokens, it's way too expensive. For most cards, the card basically has to break the game for me to be like, okay, I can recommend it. So that's the one issue. But I do think this is a playable card, and especially once it drops down to the lower pools, you'll see more people using and experimenting with this strategy. Now, right? It's an on reveal. There's a lot of ways to take advantage of on reveals. So you can play master mode, you can beast, you can play it again, right? And that could be really annoying for your opponent. You can also play Wong. Probably if you're gonna play Wong, you're probably playing Zabu into Wong on 3, into master mode on 4. And that's one way of doing that. So you could definitely do that. Another thing I wanted to put is Dr. Octopus. Actually, I think Dr. Octopus could be a pretty useful card, since you know that there's a good chance you're going to be pulling the Sentinels. The Sentinels aren't really going to leave their hand because they're going to get the Sentinels back, but you make their high roll from Octopus a lot lower, and you clog that board space. So it means that, oh, they're not going to be able to play more cards into that. So that could be a pretty good way of teching with the master mode. Then you have the Odin, right? Odin could be pretty powerful on turn 6 if your opponent needs to do something with their hand on the final turn, right? Maybe Dracula or something. You could definitely Odin and give him more buffs. It also buffs your Ronin as well, right? Gives them an extra 4 power. So you can definitely turn this Odin into a pretty big swing with the Ronin if you want to do it like that. And then we have the synergy with Darkhawk, right? We have the Black Widow, if you want to do that as well, to keep their hand space small. And then Maximus and Absorbing Man, right? These things just give you more cards. If you want to copy the master mode or you want to give them more cards, it just works with the Ronin. So overall, it does seem like master mode is pretty much set up to be a part of Ronin decks. Darkhawk can just take advantage of it, but I wouldn't say it's core for that particular deck list. But for Ronin, for sure, it does seem to be one of the major tools that they were missing to kind of keep opponents' hand sizes large, because that was really the issue with Ronin. It was hard to keep the hand size large if they knew you were playing a Ronin deck. However, most people aren't playing Ronin decks, so it was like not something you really had to think about. But now you could see it, especially if they play a mode or Mordor early, then you're like, okay, maybe they're playing this type of deck list. Now, even with this synergy, I personally don't think you should go out and start playing Ronin, even if you do have a master mode. I just don't think it's that good of a deck right now. So I'm maybe a hater, but I just think, especially with the Thanos Shuri meta, like this thing is not going to compete with that. So that's maybe my issue with this deck list. Maybe after the patch, this might have a better feel, but right now I just don't think it's the go-to deck list for now. Now I also want to talk about some of the things you can be that can annoy people with master mode. So any discards that need to hit a specific target, like Swarm, right? Master mode will mess it up because you have a much higher chance to hit the Sentinels instead of the Swarm, or the whatever, Wolverine or whatever you're trying to hit. I will say Modark kind of ignores this because it's going to discard everything. So Modark doesn't care. So if you're playing as Modark, well, then that doesn't really matter. But if you're playing against some other regular like Hela discard, that could be a pretty annoying tech into that. Now Dracula hates this card. I would say you play this on 5 or 6, right? It just annoys them. It means that your Dracula only hit 3, so that could be a pretty good counter to Dracula. I will say Dracula doesn't have a lot of these elegant counters, so adding more cards that can mess with Dracula can kind of make this card feel a little bit more balanced because you have tools against it. So I actually think it's fine that they're adding more Dracula counters because I think it needs it. Draw actually is pretty rough with Master Mode because when you're doing draw, things like Moon Girl, you want to draw your core cards. You want to draw your important tools, right? And if you're trying to copy a specific type of card, then Master Mode gives you 6 cards out of 4. Well, now you're not going to draw that core card. Another thing that Master Mode can mess up is, let's say you want to play Moon Girl. You have 3 cards in your hand, so you're gonna get the 6, and then you're gonna get the draw. If you have the Sentinels, well, you can't get that extra draw. You're always gonna get that 7 hand space. So it does really mess up with um Moon Girl decks, even though it would seem like it doesn't mess with Moon Girl decks, but if you don't have your core cards in your hand when you're playing the Master Mold, then it means you can't do any extra draw synergies. Now, if you do have the Dino, then you don't really care too much, but let's say you don't have Dino and you want to play Moon Girl, if they Master Mold you like on 4, well, then you can't do that, so that's pretty bad. And then we've talked about Thanos. Thanos does not like this card because you're already drawing so much with the stones. It's why you can play Dino in a Thanos deck, because you usually have mostly a full hand. So if they can Master Mold you efficiently and get these 2 kind of useless cards in your hand, well, it's gonna mess with your stones, it's gonna mess with your draws, and it's gonna make playing Thanos a little bit more awkward. So that is a cool tech that you can use this against Thanos right now, but how do you incorporate this deck without it being awkward, I guess, is really the question I would have. How do you make this deck work while still playing a 2-mana 2/2 that doesn't really do anything? I guess you could only play it in Thanos matchups, but it's still weird. But it could be seen play. But overall, that is my thoughts on it, right? So just a focus. I don't recommend getting it. You're going to be seeing this card in Series 3 on September. It's a good card, but I wouldn't pay 6,000 tokens for it. I'd maybe pay at Series 3 like the 1,000 tokens. But overall, that's a first impression video. Just kind of wanted to make one, see how I like it, maybe do one for Kitty if people like it. But all, see you. Take care. Have a nice rest of your day. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you tomorrow, snap. Your skills will be